This final week, the emphasis is going to be on the insects and other arthropods associated with turfgrass. So the learning objectives will be, first of all, to learn to recognize the primary insect pests that are associated with turfgrass, but more importantly, what is the kind of injury that they might produce, and what are the diagnostic features associated with their presence. Furthermore, to become familiar with some of the management options we have for these various turfgrass pests. And at the end, I want the emphasis to move to some of the other kinds of organisms that are found in turfgrass that are involved in primarily decomposition of organic matter, the organisms that are very helpful and fundamental to having healthy turfgrass, but are less commonly discussed. Now, in general, when we talk about the kinds of insects in this crop, turfgrass, we will often subdivide it by what part of the plant they're associated with. So there are some that you're going to find on the blades, on the surface. There are others that are going to be in the crown area, maybe in the thatch as well. And then there will be those that feed on the roots. In addition to the plant feeders, there's a great number of other kinds of insects and other invertebrates that are found in turfgrass. Many of these are predators or parasitoids of the insects that might be pests. In addition, there's a huge number of macro decomposers, things that are breaking down all the organic matter that is produced in a turfgrass system. And as a supplemental publication that you may wish to purchase for review in this subject from Colorado State Extension Store, there is a turfgrass insects in Colorado and northern New Mexico that summarizes the regional insects. Several years old, but the information is still quite up to date. Let's start with the insects that feed on the root systems of turfgrass, because these have the greatest impact in terms of the ability of the plant to be damaged by an insect. And by far, the most important root-feeding group of insects associated with turfgrass are insects we call white grubs. And what a white grub is, it is a larva of a group of beetles. They're larvae of scarab beetles. This is a family, Scarabaeidae. The beetles might be called various names: chafers, May-June beetles, dung beetles, and the like. And there are thousands of scarab beetles, very few of which are damaging to turfgrass. But scarab beetles tend to be heavy-bodied insects, kind of an oval body form. Some of them can get quite large, particularly in the tropics. In the lower right is a rhinoceros beetle, which we do not have here in this part of the world, but is actually the runner-up for the heaviest insect on the planet. The heaviest insects on the planet are scarab beetles, tropical scarab beetles. And the great majority, overwhelming majority of scarabs are decomposers of organic matter, maybe animal manure or dead plant matter. So larvae of most scarabs feed on animal manure or decaying plant matter. They're not plant pests. They are very important in the recycling of these kinds of materials. And one very common local example that you might see in a different setting that is a white grub would be the larva of the species we call the bumble flower beetle. And the larvae develop in compost, particularly compost amended with animal manure, horse manure in particular. This is also a beetle you'll find, a beetle larva, the white grub you'll find in cow pies and the like. And the adults are a kind of scarab beetle that happens to be a little different than many in that they're kind of fuzzy, and they'll also sometimes buzz a little bit like a bumblebee. You might see them visiting at trees or on pollen of flowers. But the focus here is on those that are damaging, and there is a suite of turfgrass damaging white grubs in the United States that are largely illustrated on this list. For this class, we're not going to talk about the common turfgrass scarabs across all of North America, but instead focus on those that are a problem in this part of the region. And there are four groups of turfgrass damaging scarabs: the May-June beetles, the mass chafers. Both of these are represented by multiple species. They are a genus of white grubs and scarabs. The Japanese beetle, a relatively new import into the region, and a fairly modestly important insect, largely limited to sites in golf course settings, the black turfgrass ataneus. So the focus for this class will be on the four species that we see most commonly in this region, and this would be the adults of those insects: the May-June beetles, the masked chafers, Japanese beetle, and black turfgrass ataneus. Now, all of these that are associated with turfgrass have some similarities in terms of their habits. The eggs are going to be laid in the soil, and this is going to be done by the adults digging into the soil. They will lay a small group of eggs. They're usually very specific about where they will lay their eggs. They're very sensitive to soil moisture, and will lay in some areas of the lawn, perhaps not in others, because the conditions are appropriate in one site and not the other. The eggs will hatch, and you will get a small white grub, a first stage white grub, and it will feed for a while, then molt to get bigger to the second stage, and then there'll be a third stage. Then they transition to pupate, and then ultimately emerge as an adult. The damage is going to be done by the larvae, and white grub larvae are fairly distinctive. When you see them at rest, they have this C shape. The hind end is fairly smooth. They've got a large head that has strong jaws that allow them to chew. They also have prominent legs that they use to help dig through the soil. And during the time of year when they're feeding on grass roots, they're going to be found in the root zone. They might be higher, they might be lower, depending on soil moisture. They'll be chewing the roots, and the effect of their chewing is going to be a root pruning, and then you see various kinds of injury associated with it. So the most obvious thing associated with white grub damage is plants look more drought stressed because they don't have a complete root system complement, so they will wilt and then sometimes even die. The area that is damaged through this root pruning may be so thoroughly cut that it'll be quite easy to pull the sod back from an area where there has been active feeding by white grubs. But the larvae are going to be in the soil, and again, their root feeding activity will produce the most common symptoms, which would be a wilting, a patchy wilting, depending on where they've been active. And again, if this progresses, it could result in turf dying. When you have large numbers, it is quite easy to pull the sod right back and expose them. So they're fairly easily observed in many settings. Again, they're during the active growing season. They're usually within the top inch or 2 inches of the soil, but mostly right near the top of the soil, but pruning those roots. Now, one other thing that is associated with turfgrass grubs is that they are attractive to several kinds of predators. In particular, mammals that come out at night, and these will dig for them. So skunks and raccoons in particular will come out at night and dig up lawns or other turfgrass areas where white grubs are, and this may become the most damaging issue associated with white grubs, not the injury they themselves do, but because they become attractive to these animals, such as again a skunk or a raccoon. These animals that are feeding on the white grubs can be quite destructive to a turfgrass area. So here's an area of a lawn that has been pretty well torn up by night prowling mammals, either a skunk or a raccoon, going after white grubs. So, in terms of diagnosing a white grub problem, you're going to have turfgrass that has appearance of drought stress, and usually it'll be mid to late summer, and then we'll get into the biology of the different white grubs, and most of them are going to have peak larval feeding in mid to late summer. If you have extensive pruning injury, the sod gets very loose and can be easily pulled up. The C-shaped larvae that the white grubs produce are extremely distinctive, and once you see them, you know what the situation is, but you'll have to dig for that. And then turf digging by night active predators like a skunk and raccoon will tip you off that you very likely have a white grub situation in that lawn.